guys, welcome back to math class. So we are going to spend today just reviewing some of the things that you learned the last time that you were with me. So we're going to start out just by naming some decimals. So here I have my 100 square grids. Remember, there's 10 going up and 10 going across, so 10 times 10 is 100. So there's 100 squares there. And remember, I asked you to do things like, graph 13 hundredths on there. So 13 out of 100. And kids came up and they drew this, right? So I shaded 13 out of the 100. 13 hundredths. And so to write it as a decimal, well, I don't have any whole, right? So I'm going to put a 0 in the ones place. And then 13 would look like this. I would have 1 in the tenths and 1 and 3 in the hundredths. Okay? So 13 hundredths. We also talked about what it would look like if you had, say, maybe, 6 of those. I don't think you can see this very well. There you go. So I have 6 out of the 100. You would write it like this as a fraction. You'd read it 6 100ths. And then you would write it like this. Again, there's no whole thing over here. You put a 0 in the tenths because there aren't any tens going up and down here. And you have 6 hundredths. It's a little bit like 6 cents, isn't it? 13 100ths is a little bit like 13 hundredths. So you remember, this is your ones place. You'd read this and then you'd say 13, and wherever that last number is, you'd say what place it's in, tenths. Now we're looking at a place value chart that we used in the classroom. You also have a rainbow chart that looks like this. So if you have that, you are welcome to use that on today's lesson, or really any lesson. So I'm going to put a random number in here with my pen. All right, so I'm going to review with you how you would say this number. So you've got 307, and then we would just read the other side of this. 123, and because that 3 is in the 10,000s place, we would say 10,000ths. So 307 and 123 10,000ths. If I had another number here, say I had a 5 in that last 100,000ths, now I would read it 307 and 1,235 hundred thousandths. What if we have something like this? Let me erase a little bit here. What if we have this number right here? Okay, 307 and 10 thousandths, because that 0's in the thousandths place. That really has the same value as this number, 37 and 100th. Remember that you can add 0's on the end, and it doesn't change the value at all. Think about if it was $307, you could write it like this, or you could write it like this. All right, I'm going to give you a practice problem. I would like for you to figure out how to say this one. How would you read that one? I'm hoping you said 101 and 203 thousandths. Now, sometimes kids look at this number over here, this whole number, and they'll say 101, like 101 Dalmatians, the movie. You want to be really careful when you're talking about decimals to only say the and where the decimal goes. Because if you say 101, you're really saying this one, and 203. And now you have a number that has 2 decimals in it. There should only be 1 decimal in each number. Another thing we learned in our first part of our chapter was how to write decimals in standard form. And standard form really just means a normal number. It's just the normal number. Okay, so we could say this 16 and 375 thousandths. And I always kind of say to myself, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. A lot of times you'll see me tapping on it to make sure. All right, so I'm going to skip down to this word form. And word form is just how you would say it out loud. So you'd say that whole number, remember the whole number's on this side, 16, and for the decimal. And then you just pretend like that 16 isn't even there. So now we say this other number, 370, numbers between 21 and 99 have a dash in them, 75. Now this is where a lot of you stop. You got to tell what place that 5's in. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So you write the word thousandths. All right, so that's the word form. You're just writing down how you would say the number. I think that's pretty easy. Let's try expanded form. So I think I can erase. I'm not sure if I can erase my writing here. Yes, I can. Okay, so expanded form is like when you were doing numbers like, when you were little, you did numbers like 135 is 100 plus 30 plus 5. Right? Remember that? Same thing, only now we've got a decimal. So just like before, we're going to take apart the whole numbers. That's an easy thing to do. So right away, the 16 you'd break down into 10 plus 6. Plus, this is where it gets a little tricky. So now we've got to do the 3. Remember the 3's in the tenths place. So I've got to write the 3 in the tenths place. Notice how I've got my 3 right next to the decimal in the tenths place here. Same thing up here. The 7 becomes a little trickier. The 7's in the hundredths place. If I write it like this, that is not the hundredths place. That's the tenths place. Look at here, my 7 is right next to my decimal. Up here, my 7 is 2 away from the decimal. So you've got to make sure you get that 7 in the right spot. So this is actually wrong. And it should be 0.7. Now I've got my 7 in the hundredths place. And then we're going to do the same thing for the 5. The 5's got to be in the thousandths, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And if you're like me, sometimes I get messed up. I'll do tenths, hundredths, thousandths, just writing little lines for me to put the numbers on. The 5 goes there, and all the other numbers are zeros. All right, let's have you do a little practice. I'm going to give you a number in expanded form, and let's see if you can write it in standard form. This would be your answer. That was pretty easy. All right, let's try a harder one. All right, the 107's easy. And now look at where your next number is. It's 2 after the decimal. So I've got to put a 0 here and a 7 there. And the 8 is 1, 2, 3, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 3 after the decimal. 1, 2, 3. The 8 goes right there. All right, I think that's one of the harder things that we have to do. Okay, another thing we worked on was addition problems. So some of you can do these in your head like this. Most of us have to write them down. So the key is lining them up according to the decimal. Now this looks a little bit strange because look, there's nothing for you to add to that 3. Remember that you can put a 0 up at the top like that. Bring the decimal straight down. Subtracting with decimals can be a little bit trickier. Let's imagine someone in your class had $47 to spend on their trip, and they went to the souvenir shop and they spent $12.51. How much money do they have left? Well, you write it up like this, and where's the decimal? Remember, the decimal's at the end. Okay, so now I'm going to write the 12 underneath there. Again, lining my decimal up. Here's where a lot of kids go wrong. They just bring the 1 straight down and the 5 straight down. But remember, you really have zeros up here. Can you do 0 minus 1? No. So you borrow. The 7 becomes a 6. This becomes a 10. Borrow 1 from the 10. This becomes 10. And I know you know how to do this part. Decimal comes straight down. So the answer is $34.49. I'd like for you to try that same problem. What if he had $47 and he spent $17.84? What would your answer be? So a whole lot of borrowing going on in that problem. The answer would be $29.16. Another thing we did with decimals is we compared them to see which one is greater and which one is less than and which one is equal. So taking a look at this top one, I want you to make a prediction. Is it greater than, less than, or equal? Hoping you said less than. Here's why it's less than. So you start over here, look at the 3's are the same. You've got a 1 here and a 2 here. 1/10 is going to be less than 2/10. Some of you are bothered because this is longer and you're thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to make this like this. Now they're the same length. Okay. All right, take a look at the next one. 3 and 1/10 and 3 and 765 10,000ths. Is it greater than, less than, or equal? I know some of you think that it's going to be, this one's going to be the bigger one because there's more numbers over here, but it actually goes like this. Because look, 3, 3, 1, 0. 1/10 is more than 0/10. Again, if it bothered you this one's longer, you can add zeros behind this one. So now it's 4 digits after the decimal, 4 digits after the decimal. 1,000 is bigger than 765. All right, try the last one. Greater than, less than, or equal? Hoping you said equal, because we've got 3 here, 1 there. Remember, you could add zeros on these. They are equal. All right, another thing we talked about is how to round decimals. And if you have worked with a calculator at all and you've done some dividing on the calculator, you might have come up with some really strange answers. So I've got this really long number here. I'm not even going to try to say that number, but let's say those are the numbers that appear in your calculator and you're at the store and your parents say, okay, I can buy 3 of them for this amount and this is how much one of them would be. What would you round that to the nearest whole number, to the nearest whole dollar? Okay, so this is the ones place. Sometimes we say rounding to the nearest whole. So if you're rounding that number to the nearest whole, do you remember what you do? This is the number in the whole, in the ones place. So I like to underline that, and then you look next door, 5 or bigger, add 1 more. Is this number bigger than 5? Yes. 7 is more than 5. So that 4 becomes a 5, and now you're rounding it to the nearest 15. So if it was money, you'd say it's about $15. So this 4 either is going to stay a 4 or become a 5. It's never going to go lower. All right, well, what if your parents say, well, I want to know how much it is to the nearest penny. So now you want to round to the nearest penny. And I'm going to try to erase very carefully my markings here. So ask yourself, where's the penny? Well, this would be the dimes, this would be the pennies. So here's the pennies right here, that big old glob. Look next door, 5 or bigger, add 1 more. it would round to 1473.